My sister-in-law announced it at Thanksgiving dinner. She did not whisper it. She did not pull my husband aside first. She stood at the head of the table with a glass of red wine in her hand and said it loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. My husband's aunt, his cousin and her fiancé, his college roommate who had driven 3 hours to be there, and me, just coming through the kitchen door with the sweet potato casserole still steaming in my hands. "I want everyone to meet Leah," she said. "Well, enjoy getting to know her while you can. Nathan's filing next month." I remember the weight of the dish. I remember the sound of the oven timer clicking off in the kitchen behind me. I remember Nathan's aunt setting down her fork. I smiled. I walked to the table and set the casserole down without a single word. Nathan and I had been married for 3 years when that happened. We met in Atlanta, where I was finishing my master's in urban planning and he was managing a logistics company his father had started. We dated for 2 years before we got married. We did not rush anything. I was careful, maybe more careful than most people my age, because I had watched my parents rush everything and spend the decade after paying for it. I owned my condo before we got married. That part matters. I bought it at 28 with my own money, a down payment I had been building since my first job out of undergrad, a 2-bedroom in Midtown that I loved in the way you love a place you worked hard to get. I picked out every piece of furniture. I repainted the living room a shade of green that took me 4 samples to find. My neighbor across the hall knew my coffee order. I was not just living there. It was mine, in every sense of the word. When Nathan and I got serious, we talked about the condo. He thought we should sell it after the wedding, buy something together in the suburbs, more space, better schools eventually. I understood the logic. But I told him I wanted to keep it as a rental property for at least a few years, build some equity, keep one asset in my name alone. He said that made sense. He said he respected that. We shook on it like it was a business deal, and then we laughed about it, and I thought that was one of the things I loved most about him, that he could talk about money without making it feel like a fight. We got married in October. It was a good wedding. Small, exactly what I wanted. His sister Renee flew in from Phoenix. I had met her twice before the wedding, once at a family dinner and once at Easter. She was warm both times, or warm enough. She brought a beautiful gift, a Le Creuset set I had mentioned once in passing, which told me she was paying attention, and I appreciated that. What I did not know then was what she was paying attention to. Renee had worked in real estate for 12 years, not as an agent, as an investor. She had a small portfolio of rental properties in Arizona and one in Nevada, and she talked about it the way some people talk about a hobby, casually and constantly, always with numbers just below the surface of the conversation. The first time I noticed it, I was telling her about the condo. She had asked me directly, and she said, "Oh, so it's still in your name only," in a tone I filed away but did not examine yet. That was Christmas, our first year married. By the following summer, she had moved to Atlanta. "A career thing," she said. "Better market." She found an apartment 20 minutes from us. She and Nathan started having lunch together every 2 or 3 weeks. I thought it was nice. He was close with his family in the way that I was not particularly close with mine, and I wanted to support that. I had no reason not to trust her. The second year of our marriage, Nathan started bringing up the condo differently. Not in big conversations, in small comments. "Have you thought about refinancing?" Or Renee mentioned a property manager she likes if you want to stop handling tenants yourself. Small offers of help. I took them at face value because that is what you do when you love someone. You assume help is help. What I did not realize was that they were testing the edges of something. I found out in September, 2 months before Thanksgiving. I had taken the afternoon off work to sort through some paperwork, lease renewal for the condo tenant, some insurance documents, nothing complicated. I was sitting at the kitchen table when I noticed a folder in the filing cabinet I did not recognize. It was labeled in Nathan's handwriting. Inside was a document from a title company. I read it 3 times before I understood what I was looking at. It was a quitclaim deed. My name was on it as the grantor. Nathan's name was on it as the grantee. It was dated 8 months earlier. My signature was on it. I sat at that table for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a dog was barking at something down the street. I could hear it all very clearly. I did not remember signing that document. I thought back through the past year, through all the papers Nathan had handed me, refinancing disclosures, tax documents, insurance updates. There had been a stack of things one Saturday morning. He had made coffee. He had explained each page the way he always did, quickly and confidently, and I had trusted him the way you trust the person you sleep next to. Every night, I pulled out my phone and called a real estate attorney. I did not call Nathan. I did not call anyone else. I just sat at the table and waited for someone to pick up. The attorney's name was Patricia. She was in her late 50s, calm in the specific way that people are calm when they have seen everything. I met with her 2 days later. I brought the folder, the original deed to the condo, everything I had. She looked at it for about 20 minutes. Then she looked at me. "The quitclaim is recorded," she said, "but the circumstances around the signing may give us grounds to challenge it. Do you have any documentation of the day this was signed? Any texts, emails, anything from that morning?" I had Nathan's texts. "Sign here too, babe, last page," with a coffee cup emoji. I had the date. I had everything. Patricia told me what I was dealing with was a transfer of title. My condo, which I had paid for in full, had been legally moved into Nathan's name alone 8 months ago. She also told me that in Georgia, a spouse signing over separate property without independent legal counsel and without full disclosure of what they are signing may have grounds for rescission. It was not guaranteed, but it was real. I asked her one question. Could someone with a background in real estate investment have advised this? She did not answer directly. She did not need to. I went home that night and made dinner. Nathan came home at 6:30. We ate together. He asked about my day. I said it was fine. I spent the next 6 weeks being very quiet and very careful. I worked with Patricia to build the challenge. I gathered every document, every text, every email where Nathan had guided me towards signing something. I requested records from the title company. I kept copies of everything off-site at Patricia's office because I had read enough to know that I needed to protect what I had. I also started paying attention to things I had let slide. The way Renee texted Nathan during dinner, the way certain conversations about the long-term plan always seemed to happen after he had seen her. One night I found an email. I was not looking. I was borrowing his laptop to print something and his inbox was open, where Renee had written, "Once the property's clear, the equity is almost enough for the Phoenix deal. Just stick to the plan." I photographed it with my phone. I did not say anything. I closed the laptop and went to bed. By the time November came around, I knew exactly what had been done, who had planned it, and what I was going to do about it. Renee hosted Thanksgiving. That had been the plan since August, and I did not push back on it when I still thought she was someone I could trust. By November, I had different reasons for not pushing back. If she wanted to arrange the stage, I would let her. I cooked anyway. I made the sweet potato casserole from my grandmother's recipe, the one I have made every year since I was 22. I made it because it is what I do, and because I was not going to let that change. We drove over together, Nathan and I. He carried the wine. I carried the casserole. I remember the drive was quiet in the way drives are quiet when two people have stopped reaching for conversation. I had been quiet for 6 weeks. He seemed to interpret it as distance, which was not wrong. Renee answered the door in a wrap dress and her best smile. The apartment smelled like rosemary and something baking. Nathan's aunt was already there, and his cousin with the fiancé I had never met, and his college roommate Owen, who hugged me at the door and said it was great to see me. Everything was warm and normal. Until it wasn't. I had just come through the kitchen door when I heard her say it. She had been talking, and then she was introducing me, and then she said what she said, and the room did exactly what rooms do when something ugly happens in them. It went very still. I set the casserole down. "Hi, everyone," I said. "I'm so glad you're all here." Nathan stood up from his chair. His face was doing something complicated. Leah, sit down, I said, not unkindly. There's actually something I'd like to share with the table, too. Since we're doing announcements, I had my phone in a small folder in my bag. I set the bag on the empty chair beside me. I looked around the table. Owen, Nathan's aunt, his cousin, the fiancé Nathan, and Renee, who had gone very still with her wine glass halfway to her mouth. 8 months ago, I said, I unknowingly signed a document that transferred the title of my condo, a property I paid for in full before this marriage, into my husband's name alone. I have since learned through independent legal counsel that this transfer was potentially structured with the goal of liquidating that equity toward an investment deal that would primarily benefit a third party. I looked at Renee. She put her wine glass down. I filed a legal challenge 6 weeks ago, I said. My attorney has obtained the correspondence and the title records. The challenge is strong. I paused. I also want to note for everyone at this table that the person who advised this strategy has 12 years of experience in real estate investment. So the idea that I just didn't understand my own financial documents, which I've heard more than once, is something I'd like to address directly. The room was absolutely silent. Nathan's aunt said, "Oh my God." Owen looked at the table. Nathan had not sat back down. He was standing behind his chair with both hands on the back of it, and he looked like a person who was just now understanding how badly something had gone wrong. Renee said, "Leah, this is not the place." "You chose the place," I said. "I just brought the casserole. I left shortly after." I did not make a scene. I picked up my bag. I said goodbye to Owen and Nathan's aunt. I told his cousin it was wonderful to meet her fiancé, and I walked out the door. I drove home alone. I stopped for gas because the light had been on since Wednesday and I had been meaning to fill up. I stood at the pump under the fluorescent lights in the cold, and I felt, for the first time in 6 weeks, something loosen in my chest. The legal process took 4 more months. Patricia was good at her job. The title company, records, and Renee's email correspondence were enough to establish that the transfer had occurred without my informed consent and with intent to exploit a marital trust context. In Georgia, that's a meaningful argument. The quitclaim was rescinded. The condo went back to my name. Nathan and I did not recover from it. I am not sure there was a version where we did. What broke was not the legal thing. Legal things can be fixed, as it turns out. What broke was the understanding that he had chosen something over me and then sat across the table from me every night for 8 months without saying a word. We separated in January and filed in the spring. It was quiet and practical, the way things are when both people are too exhausted for drama. I kept the condo. My tenant renewed her lease. The green in the living room still looks exactly right in the morning light. Renee never apologized. I did not expect her to. What she did was move back to Phoenix 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, which told me everything I needed to know about how confident she had been in the plan. Owen texted me in February. "I want you to know I had no idea," he wrote. "I still don't fully understand it. I'm sorry." I told him it wasn't his fault and that I appreciated him saying so. Nathan's aunt sent me a card, an actual paper card with a stamp. It said simply, "You handled yourself with grace. I hope you know that." I keep it on the kitchen counter. I think about what I would say to a younger version of myself, someone earlier in that marriage, maybe sitting across from Renee at Easter thinking she was warm enough, filing away a tone without examining it. I think I would say, examine it. Not because people are always scheming. Most of them aren't. But because you are allowed to understand the documents you sign, you are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to have a lawyer read something before you do. Asking for that is not paranoia. It is just knowing what belongs to you. That condo belongs to me. It belonged to me the whole time. I made the sweet potato casserole again at Christmas. I ate it alone at my own table, in my own kitchen, in my own home. It was the best it had ever tasted. I have thought a lot about the sequence of events, not to relive them, but because there is something clarifying about tracing exactly how things unfolded. Renee did not wake up one day and decide to do something cruel. It built slowly, over months, through small, calculated moves that each looked reasonable on their own. A suggestion here, a favor there. A stack of papers on a Saturday morning with coffee and a casual explanation. What she understood, and what I had not yet understood about myself, was that trust, when it is real, creates a kind of blindness. I trusted Nathan, and that trust became the mechanism. That is not a reason to stop trusting people. It is a reason to understand what trust actually is. Trust is not the same as handing someone your pen and looking away. I learned that in the hardest possible way, sitting at my kitchen table with a quitclaim deed in my hands, trying to remember a morning that I had not registered as significant at all. What saved me was not luck. It was the decision in that moment to act instead of collapse. I could have confronted Nathan that night. I could have called my mother and cried. I could have waited to see if it would somehow resolve itself, which is what I think part of me wanted to do. Instead, I called a lawyer. That one phone call changed everything that came after. Not because Patricia had some magic answer, but because I stopped waiting for someone else to define what happened to me and started building my own version of the record. There is something in that I come back to often. The world does not sort itself out on your behalf. Circumstances move in the direction they are pushed, and if you are not pushing, someone else is. Renee understood that. She had been pushing for over a year. What she did not account for was that I would start pushing back. I think about the version of me who did not look in that filing cabinet, who signed the lease renewal and closed the drawer. That version of me would have lost the condo quietly, probably in a divorce that felt like it came from nowhere, and she would have spent years trying to understand what had gone wrong. The difference between that version and the one who actually sat in Patricia's office was not intelligence or strength. It was just one afternoon of paying attention to something that felt slightly off. We owe it to ourselves to pay attention to the things that feel slightly off. Renee is in Phoenix now. Nathan has his own apartment. I have my condo, my green living room, my tenant who just renewed for another year. What was taken was returned, not because the universe intervened, but because I documented everything, hired the right person, and did not blink at Thanksgiving dinner. That is the full story. Cause and its effect, choices and their consequences, hers and mine. I made the casserole again at Christmas and ate it alone at my own table. I am not going to pretend that was not lonely. It was, but it was honest. And honest, I have decided, is the only thing worth being.